I interviewed a murderer. He says that the Adbots made him do it.
I interviewed a mother. He says the Adbots made him do it. I knew Walter Mothersky from high school. We were friends, but not terribly close. Mothersky went away for premeditated homicide on Valentine's Day 2021.
I knew Walter Madersky from high school. We were friends, but not terribly close. Madersky went away for premeditated homicide on Valentine's Day of the year 2021. When I found out the details, how he had put a shotgun between his neighbor's ribs and pulled the trigger, I had to know more. He never seemed like that kind of person to me. I contacted the prison and I reached out to him. Walter agreed to be interviewed, so we met. Walter denied any connection between Valentine's Day and the killing.
It wasn't romantic or anything, if that's what you're trying to imply. The Adbots made me do it.
He frowned thoughtfully and sat back in his chair. He said the words confidently, as though this should have already meant something to me. I was lost. Okay. Wait.
Start from the beginning. How do you know Georgie?
I prompted him.
She was my neighbor. We'd catch each other going to work and say hello. I didn't know him much beyond that.
Sounds cordial enough. So what do Adbots have to do with your neighbor?
You know how the online algorithms respond to your personality? They carefully shape content to suit your tastes. The bots learn all about you and then they show you exactly what they know you want to see.
Walter held out his hands and made a sculpting motion in the air.
Sure, I know about that.
I said. I thought of the phone in my own pocket. It was a catalog of my preferences. It knew all my favorite artists, what brands I liked, and even how I spent my free time. There was probably plenty of additional information beyond that, which my devices saved quietly for the purposes of targeted advertising.
Well, there's enough people, and so much data now. Your profile can be used to predict anything about you. The big companies have trained their AS to basically read your mind. If you hit enough data points in a given algorithm, the advertising bots can pigeonhole you into a type of person that always responds favorably to what they show. Have you ever seen an ad for something you just finished mentioning privately in your own home? That's how advanced they are these days,
said Walter.
None of this explains why you killed your neighbor, Walter. Get to the part about Georgie.
I began to wonder if he was toying with me for his own amusement.
I got depressed.
Walter blurted out. His voice wavered, and he took a moment to force himself back into a aloof posture. After he gazed around and satisfied himself that no one else had seen him almost cry, he continued his story.
I started thinking about the Adbots and how maybe my depression was predetermined because of the type of person I was. I thought that if I pretended to be someone else, it might get me out of my rut. If I could convince the Adbots I was a different person, then maybe I could become someone new.
Fake it till you make it. Fair enough. So what happened?
I said.
I started clicking on things I normally wouldn't. I watched and bought things I didn't find interesting. I visited forums where the conversations bored or offended me. Soon the algorithm started changing my ads. At first it was subtle. I saw bottled water instead of soft drinks and liquor. I thought it was going well until the Adbots started to send me satanic messages. They described a war that was coming soon.
Satanic messages?
I asked. My interest was finally piqued.
What does a satanic advertisement look like?
They were so offensive. Banners were filled with imagery that no decent human being would ever condone, much less enjoy. Sometimes I felt like it was being done purposely to upset me. Text and voices would describe nightmare hypotheticals. They warned me that people I loved were going to suffer and die in a war that was coming. The algorithms knew what I cared about, and so the messages seemed engineered specifically to disturb me. There was a phrase that kept being repeated. They always say it at some point. Keep those eyes open while you can.
Walter elaborated. Walter groaned as though the retelling pained him, then shook and drank from a nearby water fountain before returning to sit across from me. He continued.
I was a nervous wreck. It was on the day before Valentine's that Georgie made me realize what a threat he was to me.
He did something?
No, he said something. Just before he locked his door and turned to leave for work, Georgie told me, "Keep those eyes open while you can." He said it with a friendly wink. It was then that I understood he was the kind of person those ads were for. Georgie was the kind of man who might enjoy hearing the sort of awful messages I discovered.
You shot him for that?
My stomach twisted inside me. I realized that the man sitting across from me really was no longer the kind or an otherwise unremarkable teenager I once knew. He was much sicker than I imagined. I didn't kill him right away. Madersky was pleading with me now. I didn't kill him right away. Madersky was pleading with me. He saw in my eyes that I was afraid.
I didn't kill him right away. I studied the advertisements all that night before I decided to murder him. The bots made things clearer the longer I watched. Keep those eyes open while you can. Those words were a dog whistle. It was a coded phrase that unacquainted people wouldn't recognize, but it stood for bullshit and pain. It was a slogan for the war that was coming. It meant be ready to kill your neighbor when push comes to shove.
Why would you keep watching? Why would you drive yourself crazy like that?
It's almost impossible to avoid. I was tuned to a forbidden channel and it invaded my daily life more than I anticipated. The ads were in my apps, on my phone's lock screen, and constantly arriving through all of my smart devices. The signs of that shadow world were everywhere now. It felt like there were 1,000 knives aimed in my direction. There was an enemy, and it was waiting to end my life. The algorithms had been telling my neighbor about the plan to get rid of me. But now I'd finally overheard it.
Walter admitted.
So you bought a gun and shot him the next day?
The disgust in my voice was difficult to suppress.
Worse than that, the algorithm started recommending home defense and no permit weapons 3 days before that. They were anticipating that I'd want to arm myself. I'd already bought the shotgun when George slipped up and said the words.
Worse than that. Walter chuckled somberly to himself.
What did he say when you killed him? Did Georgie even see you coming?
I asked it flatly to mask the anger on my voice.
He saw me coming. All he did was ask why. That's when I told him.
What do you say?
I asked.
I said, I faked out the algorithm and I've seen the ads they show you.
Walter answered. There was nothing but blank fear in his eyes as he recounted it. I faked out the algorithm, and I've seen the ads they show you. Now it's almost Valentine's Day again, and I can't help but remember Walter's story. I'm inundated with specials and deals on my phone and laptop. Chocolates, dinner date packages, spa treatments, and stuffed animals. It's endless! I know that Walter was likely just a paranoid person with a sick mind, but he makes me curious now. It's true that online echo chambers have been weaponized to tell us only what we want to hear. It's equally valid to argue that the United States has been so polarized, with citizens looking at each other as enemies, yes, maybe even as satanic enemy soldiers in a war that hasn't yet arrived. Walter's not the only one who consumes media that infuriates and disgusts him. We all do sometimes. I'm going to investigate this further. Could it be that disturbing to see things I'm not normally shown? When my ads change, I'll know. When my ads change. When my ads change, I'll know I've become someone else to the Adbots. I'll report back with whatever I find. I'm
going to investigate this further. Could it really be that disturbing to see themes I'm not normally shown? When my ads change, I'll know I've become someone else to the Adbots. I'll report back with what I find.